All right, joining me now in the conversation is Andy Ostroy. He's the director, producer, writer, host of the Backroom podcast. He's also done an HBO documentary called Adrian. It's about actually his wife who was murdered by an undocumented immigrant. It's an amazing story. Andy, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
No problem. So, Andy, before we get to this incredible story of your wife, and the fact that you interviewed her murderer and found her murder, there's just so many amazing parts to that. But first, tell us about the podcast. I mean, you've got amazing folks on there: Paul Rudd, Judd Apatow, Eric Swalwell, my own friend Ro Khanna. So it's a real interesting, eclectic politics, entertainment, et cetera. What's the podcast about?
Well, the podcast is basically politics and pop culture, but there's a common thread to all the interviews in that whether I'm interviewing someone who's a politician or I'm interviewing a musician like Phineas or an actor like Paul Rudd or a director like Judd Apatow, it always comes back to politics because I wanted to give these folks a platform that they may not be so welcome to have in other places. You know, we always hear about people who say to athletes, why don't you just shoot the ball and be quiet? We don't need to hear your opinions. Or why don't you get up there and tell jokes or sing songs and don't get political? And I believe that non-political people in the entertainment field, they are Americans just like we are, and they have a right to share the opinions, some of which they have that are very strong about what's happening in our country. So the podcast was created partly with that in mind so that I could have a broad range of guests, but really talk about the things that are common and important to all of us.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's so much right-wing mythology out there that mainstream media, I think, accidentally buttresses. Like athletes and entertainers shouldn't talk about politics. Why not? It's like such a weird thing where like, okay, if you're a plumber or a dentist, you're not allowed to talk about politics. Why? Okay, just shut up and drill. Shut up and drill. No, we're all allowed to talk about politics. And why? Why don't they want athletes and entertainers to talk about it? Because they're very popular and almost all of them are on the left. So that's why the right wing comes up with some BS mythology about why those particular two groups should never be allowed to share their opinion, right?
Right, but it's also like, if you're like a young person and you're like, yeah, I love, I'm a progressive and I'm bouncing to Kid Rock, and then you find out, wait, what did he say? Like, he's like a Trumpster. I think it's like people don't want to know the politics of the people they adore, whether it's on screen or people, musicians. I think so. There are some people in this world that can't handle their idols having opinions that may or may not be different, because we're living in such a tribal environment right now, where like you could love somebody for 10 years as a musician, let's say, and then you find out that they're a Democrat and all of a sudden you're going to hate them. So I think that's part of why people can't accept hearing opinions from the people they kind of worship as, celebrities.
Yeah, I got a great solution to that. Don't worship them, just enjoy their craft. That's it, okay? So like Kelsey Grammer,
humans, just like the rest of us.
Yeah, Kelsey Grammer turns out to be a Republican, right? I'm like, don't tell me anything more. I love his work. I don't want to know more. Okay, let's move on. It's okay, right. It's okay. Right. I'm not gonna be like, that's it, I will never watch Cheers again. All right, yeah. So
I mean, look, I'm a liberal. I still listen to Kid Rock, I mean, what am I gonna do?
So, but that's unfortunate. That's unfortunate for different reasons, not having to do with politics.
Yeah, right. That's a whole other like. Why do I listen to Kid Rock? Period. That's a whole other conversation.
Look, to be fair, I have listened to Insane Clown Posse and Barry Manilow. So hey, I live in a glass house, so I'm not throwing Kid Rocks, if you will.
Barry Manilow, you live in worse than a glass house, Barry Manilow. You don't even have you have no walls, you have no ceiling like with Barry Manilow. It's not even a house.
It's not even a house. Okay. So now, I hate to do this, but we obviously going to turn to the documentary too, and that's a tragic situation. But it is an amazing story. So. But it does connect to politics, right? So your wife was killed in Greenwich Village. was it your daughter who was 3 years old at the time, or your son?
Yes, not quite 3. My daughter.
Yeah, your daughter, and so and it turned out that it was an undocumented immigrant. Now, a lot of people, it might have been something else. It might have been, pick a thing out of a hat, like an Asian person. Oh God, that's it. Because of that trauma, now I'm not going to like that group, right? And so that unfortunately is somewhat of a natural reaction. But you didn't have that reaction, so why not? Why did you not feed into that? Well, then undocumented immigrants are the problem.
Because it was common sense to me. I didn't see him that way. He was just a depraved killer who had, he didn't value human life. If you, for the folks out there who want to spend a minute or two, they can Google and find the New York Times op-ed that I wrote in the end of October of 2016 about this very subject. Why that I didn't believe that my wife's killer was an undocumented immigrant or an illegal alien, as he was called by many, and but just a guy who didn't value human life. So I didn't want to summarily demonize an entire segment of our population. And at the time, the intersection between my tragedy and politics is an interesting one because, Adrian died November 1st, 2006. Donald Trump was elected November 8th, 2016. So almost 10 years to the day, these two very profound events in my life occurred, which kind of set me on a different course and redefined my life and what my life meant and what I was going to do with that life going forward. And so at that time, you'll remember that Donald Trump was carting out all these angel moms. If this person was not in the United States, my daughter would still be alive, et cetera, et cetera. And I understood the pain, of course, and I understood why people felt a certain way. But I felt there was an important narrative, counter narrative to that needed to be put out into the public. And it was the first time that I actually went public with my own story. I felt that if I could maybe help a few people, get a different perspective than what Donald Trump was ramming down their throats in this very xenophobic way, that would be very important. And so, but these are two events that really did change my life because I didn't see anything more important at the time Adrian died than finding out the truth about, her killer and what happened that day. And then also when Donald Trump was elected, it was just like, what's more important than ultimately defeating this guy? And here we are 7 years later, and we're still trying to defeat him. So that search for the truth, that search for justice, civility, giving voice to people who are frustrated and angry, which is also partly what the podcast is about. It's not just me venting. It's sort of an outgrowth of, my Twitter feed and my writing, where it's a place to vent and give voice to all these feelings that people have had for the last 7 years with Trump and Trumpism. So for me, it was kind of this weird intersection of those two very profound events.
Yeah, makes sense. So Andy, you interviewed him in jail. How was that? Not to sound flip, but it was literally exactly what you would think. It was just very challenging personally. It was a complicated thing to do, just from the process of setting it up to, doing it. I mean, I directed this film, but I also had to direct myself, meeting with the animal who killed my wife. So it was challenging from a filmmaking standpoint, just emotionally hair raising. But I was on a mission to find out what really happened that day and also to humanize her for him so that, perhaps each night when he lays his head down to go to sleep, rather than have this vision of her as just, a murder victim, he sees a wife and a mother and a sister and an aunt and a human being. And so I literally, without giving much away, like I brought her back to life for him and made him confront the heinous act that he did and recognize the incredible person that he took away. Did he have a human reaction to that?
You know, it was hard to really gauge what his reactions really were and what was behind them. You know, when I left, when I was leaving that day, the warden said to me, "So how'd it go?" And I said, "Well, you know, he seemed to, you know, express some remorse and maybe feeling sorry. I don't know." And the warden was like, "Yeah, sorry for myself." And there's a part of me that felt that that's really what I got that day. That he didn't really grasp. He didn't really grasp what he did. He grasps what happened to him. But that was fine. I mean, I did get a story that was different than what he had ever told. So the event itself made sense. He was a criminal. He was robbing apartments. That's really what, you know, he was doing. And so she didn't encounter just somebody randomly who kind of had a bad day. She got caught up in the middle of something that, you know, he had been doing, and it just went south from there.
Yeah. Andy, one last thing. So you were the first to find her, and he tried to make it look like a suicide, but you knew something was off instantly. And then you tracked him down in 5 days. How did you figure it out? How did it come together that you guys caught this guy?
Well, it was really the New York City Police Department that did it. I maintain my position that it was impossible for her to have killed herself. Like, I knew that wasn't possible. But there was a detective, Jimmy Piccioni of Manhattan South Homicide, who simultaneously was investigating with the first precinct in Manhattan. And he just, you know, a combination of things, just kept on it. And it was in the end, it was good old fashioned detective work. It was a sneaker print in her apartment on a bathtub and a toilet seat. And eventually, you know, tracking some construction dust and finding out where there was construction going on in the building, and going to that apartment and opening a door and finding the same sneaker print.
Wow. All right. Good to see that there was good detective work going on in New York. Okay, even though obviously in a horrible situation. So everybody check out both things. The documentary Adrian on HBO Max. So that's this amazing story that you guys are hearing about. By the way, Andy's also started Adrian Shelley Foundation, named obviously after his wife, and they've given 100 production grants to women filmmakers, including, by the way, Chloe Zhao, who won Best Director for Oscar for Nomadland, and they did that back in 2012. So it's amazing. And then, of course, the podcast host of the Backroom podcast right there, Backroom with Andy Ostroy.
Yeah, and this week we have Mary Trump, and that's a really fun interview. So I would suggest people check that out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Andy, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.